Welcome to another episode of Raising Expectations, a Harper Harrison podcast shining a light on some of the most important topics around the built environment and the data center industry. Now, as we know, in the data center industry, it's witnessed unprecedented levels of growth over the last year or so, and will likely to continue to do so as well. Now, that growth brings great challenges across the board, particularly around people and talent as well, and not just the here and now, but also in the future. And I'm always interested to understand how the industry positions itself in a competitive marketplace and to be one that's aspirational and interesting to work in. And that in itself can go some way to creating and maybe resolving some of the talent issues that we'll no doubt continue to experience now and also in the future. Now, to tackle this subject, I'm delighted to welcome somebody who has most recently been included in Data Center Magazine's Top 100 Industry Women list, a Stanford University graduate who has over 7 years in the data center experience and who is currently at DC Blox as Director of Hyperscale Programs. And she herself has a fascinating background. So without further ado, wanted to welcome Kaitlin Schaberg. Kaitlin, welcome to Raising Expectations.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
No, not at all. Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm going to start with we always start in the same sort of place, your background and a bit about yourself. But I'm going to start with the inclusion in Data Center Magazine's Top 100 list. How does that feel, and how did that come about? And congratulations, first and foremost.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a surprise to me, to be honest. I believe this is their first year putting something like that out. Data Center Magazine, it's their first year of putting that out. So it was definitely a surprise. It was definitely an honor. I did not expect it at all. It was a nomination pool, I believe, and one of my fellow colleagues actually nominated me without my knowing. So my first notice was, hey, congratulations, you're in the top 100 list. And I was like, wow, great. Tell me more. I don't, help me understand what this is a little bit, but absolutely thrilled for, the exposure, not only for myself, but definitely for DC Blox, which is growing at a very quick pace in the market. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I hear. And tell us kind of, well, let's take you back to the kind of early years, your college, and then your sort of early career as well. Can you tell us a bit about sort of Stanford, how that was, and then what you sort of did immediately afterwards?
Yeah, well, I can talk about Stanford all day. It was a phenomenal experience, and I was actually an athlete, student athlete there as well. So I had both the athletic side and the academic side, which was perfect for me because I was, the jock and also the nerd at the same time. So perfect place for me to be. But no one talks about going into the data center industry straight out of college, right? There's no program, there's no degree for data centers at most colleges. Now, there are some technical college, and that's changing a little bit as well. But back then, I didn't know what a data center was. I knew I wanted to be technical. I knew I wanted to do something a little bit business strategic heavy, and wherever I could mix the two, I was happy. So that fortunately landed me in data centers actually straight out of college. That was my first job out of college. And I've been here ever since. I've loved it. It was exactly what I was looking for in that technical and business kind of mind perspective. And it's allowed me to grow completely organically. And I've loved that about it. It piques my curiosity every single day. And hence why I've been here for, 7, almost 8 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are kind of one of the few, because not, I think, like you say, it's the visibility and the understanding of the industry isn't quite up to the level as maybe other industries out there. So you're kind of rare to come out of college straight into the industry. Just before we move on to that piece, talk to us a little bit about your role now, if you can, Kaitlin. Because it's interesting to understand as kind of director of hyperscale programs what you do at DC Blox, and just giving people an insight into what you do.
Sure, sure. Well, if I don't mind, I'll add a little background to that as well. I think it helps with the story and kind of where I've grown into. So My first job was in data centers. It was with a company called QTS, which is now, one of the top 3 data center companies in the world, arguably maybe number 1, depending on who you talk to. So that was incredible to be a part of, to see the growth from them being a small to medium-sized company into, what they are now, which is a giant in the industry. But I was able to, I had mentioned, grow a little bit organically. So I had roles in finance, I had roles in operation, I had roles in construction, and got to see a lot of the overall process, including some of sales, including some of legal, which is a huge span. Most people don't get to see that early in their career. So DC Blox, I ended up here because it seemed to be the perfect culmination of all of those different experiences I had at QTS as the director of Hyperscale Programs, right? With Hyperscale, especially today with everything going on, you have to touch every single function of the business at some point to get it right. So I've been super blessed to have taken that path, and hindsight 2020, it sounds really good. But you're going like this quite a bit. And this industry allows you to do that because there's so many technical aspects that have to come together, different teams that have to come together for even one project to be successful. So very lucky in that regard.
And I'm guessing the way the industry is evolving and how fast it's growing, and how, as you said, with both now with DC Blox, but also with QTS, how quickly they've grown over the years as well. That allows you to, as a professional, to have different tastes of different things, and your career can evolve in many different ways, I'm assuming. It's kind of
Yes,
the exciting part.
absolutely. Yes, when you're a growing company, there's plenty to be done, right? So there's always opportunity if you're interested in learning about something, interested in getting experience in a certain area. A lot of times the answer is going to be yes, right? Find a project where it makes sense to go not only do your role, but to go branch out a little bit and experience something else, which is exactly what I was able to do.
So I'm guessing that the person that left college, how close is your expectations of what your career would look like? How close is that to the reality of what you're doing now? Are you in totally a kind of different direction, or did you imagine kind of your career being like this, I guess?
I did not. I did not imagine it that way at all. If you would have told me when I graduated that I was going to be in this industry for, going on 8 years now, I would not have believed it. I would have said, no, I'm going to give them my 2 to 3 years, like millennials do. Try it out, see what works. If I don't like it, I'll go somewhere else and, try to find the right fit for me.
Yeah,
But this has been quite a good fit.
yeah,
I couldn't tell you where I would end up being. It would probably be consulting or, something pretty, I hate to say generic, right? But a pretty typical path out of college, let me say it that way, as
yeah.
opposed to kind of this background industry that supports so much, but we don't really hear it talked about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll touch on that in a little bit because I think that's so important into how the industry does position itself. But you mentioned when you were at college, you kind of didn't know what a data center was. To what extent is that kind of not true, but what did you know about data centers back when you were at college? Had you heard of them? Did you know what kind of they provided to us, or yeah, how much?
Yeah. Um, Admittedly, I didn't know as near as much as I thought I did. That's probably the nerd coming out of me where you're like, yeah, I can talk about this, no problem. It's technical, I can figure it out. No, I did not even know the basics of it, but I was fortunate. My father actually has worked with quite a few power companies in his career. He's an electrical engineer by trade. He turned into a almost project manager with high voltage projects, which includes, right, power companies and everything they're doing, but also their kind of internal data centers. So I was hearing these words and these acronyms like megawatts and, crack units and all these different things. I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't care about it because it was his thing and it wasn't my thing yet. And lo and behold, you get introduced to the industry that way and you go, wow, there's more to this than I thought. And, obviously knowing what I know today, I was pretty much at level 0 coming into the industry.
But again, I guess it's quite rare, or you had that kind of family connection that gave you a little bit of insight, albeit, I guess when you're younger, you kind of hear it, you don't necessarily delve
Yeah.
further and pay too much attention. Um, Now AI is in the news almost on a weekly basis, the widespread sort of mainstream news. And I guess data centers are becoming a little bit more, they feature more in the news than maybe they did kind of 5, 6, 7 years ago. How do what's
Yeah.
the average person now not in the industry? What do you think that they know about data centers? How much do you feel that they know about
Yeah.
what they do and how they impact us?
Yeah. I would say most of them are probably not quite at level 0, but maybe they're at level 1, level 2. They've heard about data centers now, particularly with AI coming on the scene. You can't have AI, you can't have, big data, in all these technology companies that we have today without having data centers on the back end. So you're exactly right. It is becoming a little bit more mainstream. People have at least heard of a data center, which was not the case 10 years ago in a lot of instances when I was having conversations. But definitely today, more people at least are like, okay, I know what you're talking about. Tell me more, instead of, this is weird, go away.
Yeah, and that the cloud is up there, and the cloud is not necessarily up there.
Yes.
Or it's not up there at all. And just touching on that sort of news element, I think again, kind of mainstream and top level news. I think data centers do receive a fair amount of criticism for environmental energy consumption, and I guess how do you feel? How important is it for us to try and address that balance out there with people necessarily not in the industry and local communities as well?
Great, great question. This is something that I guarantee every data center talks about, if not on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, because our engagement with the communities is extremely important. And there is a lot of misinformation out there, right? People see a big industrial building coming into their community and they're like, hey, why not retail, or why not these other things? But what I don't think most people realize is that data centers provide a really great foundation for an ecosystem for a community. And just to give you a couple examples of what I mean when I say that, one of the big things that data centers need is power, right? So a lot of times that means we have our own substation. We're bringing in new lines to a new area that hasn't had that type of power before. And just even that alone creates the opportunity for more retail, more residential, more, anything it needs to be, simply by getting the power in that area, right? Once power comes, then fiber follows, then water follows, right? All the other utilities start to follow because now you have a presence. And data centers in a lot of communities, particularly that DC Blox is in, that's the foundation. So kind of tweaking that narrative a little bit, helping people understand that sometimes is really, really valuable. I would say the other piece of that is a lot of data centers do have sustainability programs. I know DC Blox has a sustainability program. I know QTS had a sustainability program. And we're always going out and working with our communities, working with the municipalities, whether that's city, county, jurisdictions, and if they have certain environmental laws or preferences or whatever it is, right? It's like, hey, go plant some trees, or help build us a park, or help give something back to the community, to schools. And there's a lot of programs out there that are really trying to help, again, with that narrative of data centers are here to help. We're here to expand your communities, be a part of your communities. And I know DC Blox, that's one of our foundational values. If we're not engaging with the community, we're doing something wrong. And so it's
Yeah.
front and center in our conversations quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great because I think that's some of the stuff for me that is missed. I think it's very easy to report on how much. I often see statistics of how much electricity and power these things use as a total percentage of the Earth's kind of power generation. And I get it. It can seem, the headlines can seem kind of, well, that's a crazy amount, but there's so much investment and there's so many cool initiatives that can that are positive for local communities as well. And I just think it's really important for us to highlight and address that balance as much as we possibly can. Also, notwithstanding the impact how we live our lives because of the functionality that data centers provide to us as well, which is again kind of balances the argument a little bit as well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone wants the convenience of technology, but they don't want, right, the back end support infrastructure side of that technology sometimes. So it's a really interesting, almost double-edged sword in people's minds. And again, the more we can talk about it, the more we can help change that narrative, I think the better.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also, how much do you, because I always feel data centers, let's be honest, data centers aren't necessarily aesthetically the sexiest piece of real estate you'll ever see. And some may disagree, but they're not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing. But the industry itself, what that, and the introduction of AI into kind of how we discuss the functions of data centers, how important is it for us to lean on that to make the industry kind of stand out, to be one of choice for the future generations, and give it that kind of sexy element that maybe I always say a SpaceX has, or maybe other elements of real estate where you're building tower, kind of skyscrapers, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a couple things you hit on there, and I'll kind of break them apart if you don't mind. So you're right, right? Essentially, a data center is a big industrial box, just, like a distribution center for Amazon or any other the industrial centers that you might see. But again, there are some really cool things that data centers are trying to do with that. Again, planting trees so you can't actually see the building, or providing screenings. A lot of communities and jurisdictions are actually requiring screenings that have, some sort of mural or something that actually, again, provides something back to the community via art or whatever it may be. And the other piece that you had kind of mentioned is that data centers have been a little bit unsexy, and that's exactly the way I used to think about it myself, is it was kind of behind the scenes. It was not that upfront, oh my gosh, I want to talk about this every day to all my friends because they'll get it and they'll think I'm cool and this is great. When I used to talk about data centers, again, most people didn't know what they were, right? So it was a little bit like, this is kind of what I would call an unsexy business, but that's changing. And you hit on it exactly, especially with AI. We are on the frontier of some really, really cool and innovative companies, really innovative new industries potentially with AI itself. And data centers are the backbone of that. So it is more in mainstream. It is being talked about more. It is something that, we have interns now all the time in these data center programs that are getting exposure in college and even before, right, coming out of high school, where we didn't have even the option to do that before because it wasn't part of our verbiage every day, right? It wasn't something that we knew about, but absolutely AI is driving us, right up front and center as the backbone of that industry.
Yeah, I think it's a real opportunity for us to lean on AI and kind of really put the industry, just open the doors to the industry as much as we can to make it certainly one that's interesting and appealing to certainly the younger fraternity and also existing people out there in sort of mid-level careers that are in the position to make the transition. I think that's really important. From a and one of the cool things about the industry for me is just how quickly it evolves and changes and the opportunity that gives to you. I'm guessing it's evolved a lot since you sort of the early QTS days, and relatively speaking in a career, that's still a very short space of time. So just how much has it kind of evolved in that period?
Yeah, yeah. If I can give you some numbers to kind of help with the scale that we're talking about here. When I first joined QTS, 200, 250 kW deals were a big, big deals. And that metric is in power for anyone interested. Kilowatts, kW is what we call it. We use a lot of acronyms in the industry. So help me, Dell, if I need to define some of those, if I speak this, gibbery nonsense at you. But that was in kilowatts. And today there's deals being done at the gigawatt level, which is, 1,000 times kilowatts gets you to megawatts, 1,000 times megawatts gets you to gigawatts. So the scale of the back-end infrastructure that is needed, again, to support all of these new technologies that we're all on the cusp of is incredible to see and be a part of that, literally from day one when I started at QTS to now being at DC Blox, where, if you're not in the megawatts, you're probably not in business very long, right? You got to get some of these bigger deals because they're out there and they're everywhere. And that's how you drive a company forward, very much like DC Blox is doing currently.
Yeah, that's a great. Those numbers are really interesting. It gives people at home like a real sense of scale as to how things have changed. And we touched a little bit on you on the variety that it's given you in your career by working for businesses that are evolving so quickly. But then, what does that do to the development of yourself as a professional and also just as as a human being outside of work? What's that given you in your career so far?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about this industry is exactly what you touched on, the varied experience, right? Because there are so many different groups that come together. If you come in as a, construction management major out of college, or you come in as an engineer or an architect, or even, something in real estate, every single one of those different industries at some point could lead you into being a data center professional, which is just like there's no other industry out there like it that will allow so many different potential paths coming out of college merge back into this one industry. And that's my favorite thing about it. That's my favorite thing about my career is just how much you can get exposure to all of the different parts and pieces of the overall data center delivery process. And that exposure that it gets you not only to your business, right? Not only to data centers, but also to your customers' businesses and your partner businesses who are supplementing, right? The construction side or the design side or the real estate side. And you have plenty of different directions to go. If you don't want to be a construction management professional and you go, maybe I want to go try something else. Data centers gives you the perfect space to go do that. It is super unique in its ability to go do that. And that's what I preach to any young professional that I meet. If you're not sure what you want to do, but you want to be in tech, keep some of these things in mind because there are pathways that you probably don't even know about yet.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing because I think a lot of the younger professionals sort of that are coming through, they want that variety. There's a lot of talk about sort of younger professionals kind of having shorter attention spans, probably the wrong word, but just sort of shorter tenures. And that doesn't have to necessarily be in companies. That can be in the job functions itself. But and then there's also
Yep.
the opportunity. This is truly global industry that gives opportunities for global mobility as well, which I think is something that's only going to increase as time goes on, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's another attractive piece about the industry. It's not just, a US industry. It has to be global, right? Because, for example, your big search engine companies are global, right? And your big, web space companies are also global. So anywhere where you have data, anywhere where you have AI, anywhere where you may have to swipe a credit card, for example, at some point, every single one of those data points has to pass through a data center. So it opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. You've touched on this a little bit, but what is your favorite aspect of the industry from your point of view, from a career perspective?
I will say that organic growth is probably number one. If I had to pick a number two for me, um, personally in my career, if I am not constantly, having my curiosity piqued, if there's not something new I can learn, I'm not happy, right? I want sort of that challenge. I want to be able to connect the dots in different things in different ways than I have before, just for my own, mind and how I see the world and how I see the industry, how I see, tangential industries as well. There's just, so many cool things, but you can also use the data center industry as a way to get certifications because we need things like cybersecurity, we need IT, we need CRM functionality for the sales side. All these different spaces again have to come together. And so there's probably a dozen different ways you could further your career off the top of my head, but those are some really, really cool ones. I myself am working towards getting my PMP in project management and a couple other certifications that are probably lesser known, but perfect vehicle to go do that. You could have the experience in your career to be able to support that certification. And, most companies now want people that have some of those certifications, that have the experience, and they will help you do that as well.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That continuous improvement aspect. I'm sure as an athlete as well, pushing yourself always to the next milestone, the next level, which is really good. What do you think the future holds for the industry overall, and I guess the positive impact that can have for people at the earlier stages of their careers, or maybe wishing to switch industries, as we said, which is another important factor. It's not just the grassroots; it's enticing people from other industries to see that this is an industry of choice. But where do you think the
Yeah.
industry it will continue to go?
Yeah. Well, I do believe AI will help drive us forward. I know there's some really interesting challenges around AI right now, and just again, we went from, kilowatts to megawatts to gigawatts. And I think AI will start living in that gigawatt space as opposed to living in megawatt space, just from a sheer power capacity perspective. And that's really going to drive us forward in innovation. Again, and there's going to be a lot of companies created around AI. I think we're starting to see that already. Or, people are going to be using AI to support their industries. And so data centers have a really interesting challenge along again with all of our partners and all of our customers of how we figure out the right path through that challenge. We're on the cusp of something pretty incredible with this AI revolution. And there's no telling, and in all honesty, what those new things are going to be that help, maximize the efficiency of the power used, right? Maximize the efficiency of these data center infrastructures, maximize the cooling side, because cooling is another big piece along with power that data centers, have to use. So it's, I'd like to say that I have the magic ball and here's what's going to happen, but we're really on an interesting ledge here that, someone or, someone's are going to figure out some pretty interesting things used in many, many, many industries to come because we're forced to, kind of innovate, to challenge ourselves, to find new ways through this current opportunity.
I think that has to be one of the attraction points, one of the real interesting aspects of the industry, the not knowing. But that's cool. It's the innovation, it's the being a part of that kind of journey and where the industry takes us and the future of AI and how that evolves as well. I think that has to be one of the most exciting, enticing aspects into the industry for sure.
Absolutely.
And then just looking a little bit into the future as well. Keen to understand what the future holds for you and the team at DC Blox. You guys are doing great things. Not expecting kind of what I call NDA busting revelations here or headlines, but what can you tell us about what's going on there and what's in store for the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are growing. Again, faster than sometimes maybe we'd like. We were holding on to our seats a little bit, just trying to stay on the ride. We had mentioned probably before we started this recording that, just this past week, it was all hands on deck. We had a day off from work scheduled, but it was like, no, we're pushing through. We got a team together. Great things are coming for DC Blox that I probably shouldn't share quite yet, but absolutely on the cusp of, what I call crossing the chasm from a small business to a medium business for for DC Blox. QTS made that same jump very early in my tenure with them as well, and it's very cool to see and experience that journey again, but also to better understand it and to better be able to provide DC Blox with my experience and some ways that we can cross that chasm a little bit more efficiently. So that's me personally. That also includes, building out more teams. I'm building out my team. I think most teams at DC Blox are building out their teams. There's a lot of hiring that's going to happen in the next year or two. And that's absolutely due to us driving the business forward. So on the DC Blox side, I will just say, again, right, we're going from a small data center business to almost a medium data center business, really getting into that pocket of really solid high megawatt deals. That's 100%, I think, our focus. We've been what they would call an edge data center provider, which is, maybe 10 megawatt size facilities, and filling that up with smaller companies who maybe take, a rack here or there, or a portion of that here or there, to, again, hyperscale. My job is hyperscale programs, right? So ideally, we would be moving into hyperscale where, you have purpose-built data centers in key markets that are sold out completely to one customer, right? We've seen that transition from a lot of companies in the industry, and DC Blox is right there, making some really interesting moves.
That's exciting. And you mentioned towards the beginning of the answer the QTS being a huge business. There's some great businesses out there to work for that are huge in size, but I just think that journey of becoming a sort of a small to a medium business and all the fun that's involved in that growth is kind of the best kind of business to work for, in my personal opinion. It's where you get exposed to so much stuff. It's where you see the growth happening, and you're probably more entrenched in the story, which I think is really good.
Yeah, it's really powerful. That's actually one of the reasons why I moved from QTS into DC Blox as well, is because QTS was this huge name, right? And there was, less and less opportunity to do something new simply per the fact that they weren't growing at the speed that they were previously. And again, DC Blox ended up being just the perfect fit, the perfect culmination of everything I had done prior to coming to DC Blox. And it was just the right fit at the right time, right? If you can find that anywhere in a career, that's a win. But again, to your point, seeing the story firsthand, being part of that story firsthand is really powerful. It's where I like to be.
Yeah, and I think again, one of the things about the industry, the levels of investment that we've seen over the last few years, or longer than that, but certainly over the last couple of years, new platforms in Europe, new platforms in the US. There's, you can go and work for one of the more established players, the hyperscalers, technology companies for sure. But there's just so many opportunities to position yourself in new emerging businesses. So the choice is ever growing, which is great.
Right.
And for you personally, one of the most influential women in data center industry, what does the next 12 months hold with that title, and how can you use that to good effect?
Yeah, well, I'm always a fan. If I can expose the industry to more people who may not have otherwise been exposed to it, that's a great thing. If I may just do a little plug here, there's some groups that I work with as well outside of my day job, that are in kind of the nonprofit, industry kind of networking relations type groups. One of those is Women in Technology. And I actually co-founded a young professionals group within Women in Technology and built a program specifically targeted to people coming out of college or transitioning into technology careers. And even just talking about what you do, right? And having people ask questions in that type of forum while they're still young, while they're curious about different technology avenues that they can go down for their career is really powerful. And especially to hear it from a woman, right? I know we haven't touched on this a lot yet, but we're still very much in what I would call a male populated industry. And I use that term pretty specifically as opposed to male dominated. Women can dominate the field just as well as men. But it's definitely populated with men still to this point. So something to work on for our industry, something that I'm very passionate about myself. But that exposure, especially young, giving them the options to, but just be willing to go explore, be willing to be curious, I think is a really powerful message.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that grassroots education is so important. And what if people want to get involved in that initiative, Kaitlin, what they should do? Reach out to you, or should we put a link in the comments of the episode so people can kind of get in touch with somebody?
Yeah, I'm happy to take any inquiries. Again, especially young professionals, especially women. You guys are close to my heart. But anyone absolutely welcome with questions. I would say, I think we probably have a team that's better suited to field some of that, which I can get you the right information probably after this, Dell, if you don't mind, that we can add to notes or however you want to do that. But happy to answer all the questions. Again, I think the more people we can talk to, the more exposure we can give, the more questions we can answer, the better. So happy to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And we'll definitely put the notes in the episode comments. You mentioned about kind of women in industry, not necessarily male dominated, but certainly the majority of people in the industry are male. How's the industry come along since you entered the industry, Kaitlin?
Yeah, I am probably in a pretty unique situation myself because I've always been surrounded by fantastic women leaders in my journey in this industry. I've also been surrounded by fantastic male leaders in the industry, which is, probably somewhat of a given. But I have also had the experience where I'm the only woman on the only woman on my team, which is a little bit interesting. And, maybe that's the athlete in me coming out. Like, I'm happy to be competitive with whoever shows up, right? Like, I'm a team player. I played a team sport, but at the same time, like, it's just another guy showing up thinking he can beat me at something, right? Is how I look at it. No, I'm right in there. I can talk the talk. I can walk the walk all day long. But at the same time, again, it's a team. And these are people that I can learn from because we all bring different experiences, as we had hinted at early on in the show. Not everybody comes straight out of college into the data center career, right? So they may be off, they may have spent 4 or 5, however many years in finance, or they may have spent however many years in construction. And the opportunity opened up that they jumped into the data center industry. And so there's a ton to learn when you have those kind of different people with different backgrounds and different experiences coming into the same place. And we're all trying to push each other forward, again, challenge each other, hold each other accountable. And at the end of the day, be the best versions of ourselves and help the company be the best version of itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely well said. And I think for anyone listening to this, the Data Center Magazine Top 100 Women is a really good kind of showcase of some of the unbelievable female talent we have across the industry, in all kinds of positions, not just board level. It's across the whole hierarchy of the industry. It's really inspirational, and yeah, it's really cool. And I think just we need to continue that message also as well, for sure. Um, Now, I just want to end on. I normally ask what you were doing in the future, if it wasn't in the data center industry. Which kind of I'm going to ask you that question, but I'm also kind to hear more about your athletic kind of background and your sports background, and because that's always interesting. What sport was it that you were adept at?
Yeah, I played softball. I was one of those kids, believe it or not, that was just about in any sport I could get my hands on. So, I started early in gymnastics. I started early in softball. I did a little volleyball. I did a little track. I just kind of bounced all over the place, through my K through, 12 years before college. But, at some point, if you're going to get recruited for a college, particularly a college like Stanford, at some point you got to be committed to that sport. In some ways that's good. In some ways, people like me sometimes wish you could do multiple sports, which is possible, but was not for me in college. So it was definitely softball. But you also heard me say I was a total nerd. I love school. I love learning. I love being curious, right? You've heard that term a lot as well throughout this show. So as soon as, my softball eligibility was over, I was like, okay, I'm going to go be a nerd for a while. And that was 100% fine with me, right? Ended up in data centers, which, arguably could be construed as a pretty nerdy industry as well. So,
Nice, nice, great answer. Well, look, I really appreciate you being a guest on Raise Expectations. You've given people a great insight into your background and some of the really exciting elements of the industry, which I just think is a really important message for us to continue on this podcast, but also as many people who can get involved in that grassroots aspect and just educate the people out there, and to challenge some of the mainstream media stories as well that kind of have a slight imbalance against the industry. All of that sort of stuff, I think, will make will help us put the industry in a better place from a career choice of people in the future. But Kaitlin, thank you very much for being a guest. Amazing, appreciate it, and very best of luck to you and the team at DC Blox as well for the future.
yes, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak about all this. I just, thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving space to a lot of these questions that are, near and dear to my heart, near and dear to the industry. And I'm sure you're doing the same across plenty other industries. So just thank you for the work you're doing.
Thanks, Kaitlin.